Welcome back to the Heal the Hurt podcast. As you know, last week I left you on a bit of a cliffhanger as to, I'd asked Mike, what was the most important thing any individual needs to do to live to their full potential? Well, we're going to get started off with that. We're also going to cover lots of different topics that are incredibly deep and insightful to help you achieve your full potential and share more of our trials and tribulations of our own life. So I think you'll enjoy this as well, and you're going to walk away with a lot of skills and tools that can really help you achieve your full potential. So let's get right back to it. But what would you say? Where does somebody start? What's like the single greatest thing they need to look at to begin with?
Well,
or a second question,
okay.
A different question would be, no matter what their struggle is, what one piece has to be a part of their recovery journey?
Boundaries.
So codependence.
I mean, that, yeah. The problem with Pia, and I'm not disparaging her at all. I admire her. I have grown immensely because of her. And, I've met her. She was in our clinic for, years and years ago, 20 years ago, doing seminars in our clinic and had dinner with her and that kind of stuff. But is that she knows so much. It's kind of like Joel Lubar. She knows so much up here, and she is an okay communicator of it, but she's not a great communicator.
No, that's really hurts her.
She would say the same thing. I think, I
tell
my wife
people
was
when
watching,
watch their videos. I'm like, now you're gonna have to grind this out because this isn't going to be a pleasurable speaking experience.
And reading her is the same way.
Yes.
And my wife and Pia are the same age, and my wife was trained in Pia stuff too. And Patty was watching. That's my wife. Was watching a Pia podcast, and it was just this kind of the same old thing, except that she is so real. That's one of the beautiful things about her. And the content. She's got more content than the books that would fill the earth. That lady is brilliant, but all of this came out of her spirituality. She tells her story about how all this came about. She was working with alcoholics and drug addicts and people with personality disorders, the people that nobody can fix. Okay. And especially personality disorders. And she'd go home and vacuum, and these thoughts would come into her head about, all right, you approach it this way, this way, this way. Now, that's not graduate school. You don't learn that in graduate school. I'm sorry to tell you, you don't write a doctoral thesis on that.
That was my experience.
Or dissertation.
Yeah.
And then she would take it back into her clinic and have people work through it. And from that came her model. And her model is, the book Facing Codependence sort of outlines her model. And she talks about, 5 adult skills adults can do, that they know how to do self-esteem. They know how to be boundaried. They know how to own their own reality. They know how to do self-care, and they know how to live in moderation. Those are the 5 adult skills. And she starts with boundaries. Okay. And not boundaries like, don't touch me there, although that can be a part of boundaries. It's I have responsibility about touch, and I get to determine when, where, how, what music is playing, whatever, in that environment. I don't have to let you touch me. You have to ask me. That's one element, but the powerful element is what Pia talks about, and nobody else that talks about boundaries talk about, and that is internal boundaries.
Yes.
The sense of having somewhat of a mirror of truth to look in, and what happens in that is that first of all, you have to discern, is this my stuff or is this your stuff?
Yeah.
Okay. So I use the tennis court and the net, and I'm on this side of the net, and you're on that side of the net. And I might have been trained to let you take all of your garbage and put it on my side of the net. Okay. Or I might have been trained to come over to your side of the net and fix you.
Yes.
Help you with your serve.
Yeah.
But that's a boundary violation. I need to learn how to stay in my world and evaluate that. And if you dump your garbage over here, I'm just going to take it and I'm going to put it over here. I don't have to keep it. It's just not mine. And the other concept about that is just the sense of being able to evaluate yourself in a concept of truth. And I, that goes back to spirituality for me, and being able to see yourself as truly as you can. And from that piece is how you operate in the world, not what you say about me, not what my wife says about me, not what my dad said about me or my mother said about me, but what my higher power says about me. And how, and that goes, that creeps into the self-esteem, and so when I learn how to, I'm trying to think of a good word for it, but when I learn to substantially be able to operate out of this sense of internal boundary, where truth occurs, and I can differentiate myself from you, and I can observe my adaptations, and I can observe both sides of those adaptations, both the unempowered and the empowered, and then I learn to live in authenticity. And when I'm learning to live in authenticity, then I can start to love myself. Okay. Yeah. And Pia says that, self-esteem is the hard work of learning to love yourself, not because of what you can do or who you know, but because of who you are. It's about not being a human doer as a human being. And so those two things fit hand in hand. And then from there, you start learning about reality. There you start learning about self-care. And there you start learning about moderation.
That's what my life change was, learning the internal boundary stuff, because as you know, I was going through a divorce with someone who was physically and verbally abusive, and was always, I'll never forget what you said to me, because I had tremendous shame that because I was so immature and underdeveloped, that the only skill I had back then to end the marriage was to hire escorts. Mm-hmm. I was looking for a way out. And I didn't know this consciously, but I looking back, see, I didn't have the awareness. I didn't have the internal boundary and internal truth to know that I was actually hiring escorts because I wanted a divorce. I didn't even know I wanted a divorce. I didn't even know I wanted out. I was so detached from who I was. But as I started to regain that, and I felt tremendous shame about it, I was getting in touch with the authentic self of me. And I'll never forget what you said to me. You said, Kenny, take a Labrador puppy, probably the sweetest animal in the world. And if you take that puppy and you chain it up and you leave it outside and you starve it, you don't feed it, you don't pet it, you don't love it, you don't give it water, eventually even that Labrador puppy will bite you. And that moment was the first moment I created a separation, an internal boundary around, I don't deserve to be treated that way. It was that first moment of, oh my God, not condoning my actions. I can own my imperfections, and this was the best I could do, but also I'm a human being and I don't deserve that. That was the first break. And then I was allowed to, as we would I had to role play. So when she does this, I say, you would model, this is how you put those boundaries in place. And I do it with my clients now. And so it's changed my life. I mean, with the public forum I have, the people that criticize me that don't like my style or dress or whatever, I'm able to go, okay, well, where's the truth in this? Okay. Like one guy in one of his comments, he's like, you have average wit. And I'm like, he's right. I'm kind of funny, but it's mostly an average funny. Like there's my brother and others, like they're really funny. And so it's like, he's going, he's going on and on. He's talking about ego. And I'm like, yeah, I've struggled with ego problems. Like I could keep contained, love myself, accept truth that I'm imperfect in those areas, but it doesn't belittle me. It's just, yes, we all have our strengths. Now I have other ones, but these are things I work on, but I don't lose me. I stay on my side, to use your example, I stay on my side of the court and I allow him to stay on his. He can have that reality. He can have all that. It's the net keeps us separate. And that's why, to me, and these are things we never get taught in childhood, because all of our, in my estimation, every childhood is boundaryless, because for centuries we've never taught anything about how to be a parent. And even if we did, we're perfectly imperfect. We have all left childhood with wounds. And the inability for us to accept that as a society, to me, is heartbreaking. That's something I'm trying to beat down. Not to blame parents. It's not about that, but it's about to get to that reality. Because from there, then both child and adult, regardless of age, can make peace. But it can't be done until that reality is brought into it.
So getting back to boundaries for a second, what is foundational? I mean, boundaries is the beginning, but also working through your trauma is also, I have a note here. Trauma is my emphasis because it is foundational to why we don't. What? Can't read I typed it. We don't grow. Okay.
Yeah.
So what happens is that we have holes in our boundaries. And again, this is the brilliance of Pia. And those holes are people shaped or event shaped.
Yeah.
And so if we don't work on that alongside of this, then whenever we meet the situation that reminds us of the trauma, we go back to that either less than person or the walled off person.
Yeah.
And the boundaryless person, is the care taker, so to speak, a lot of times. And so I don't deal with my stuff. I take care of you, and I might take care of you by letting you abuse me.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I don't know how many survivors I've talked to who thought they were the only one being abused, when whoever the abuser, the perpetrator was, they were abusing everybody, but they made them feel special that they could take it. Now that's the false empowered side of abuse and boundaries. And so what we do is, on the false empowered side, is we wall off and we think, well, I'm safe because I'm walled off. Well, the problem with a wall is you can't see reality. Okay. You see the wall. So you think you see reality, but you don't. And that means you're in deception. Okay. And if you're in deception, then you're going to get surprised. Yeah. It's going to bite you in the butt. It's going to come back and get you. Yeah. And so being behind the wall with somebody that's offensive, that may be appropriate temporarily, but you also need to think about, if this is constantly an offender, do I need to be in relationship with that person? Because you can't be perfectly boundaried around somebody who's an offender constantly. Okay. And that's, now we're talking personality disorders and true perpetrators in life. But learning that side of it was also very important to me, because that's how I survived. I survived by walling off. I didn't feel anything. I didn't think anything. I just stored it in my body, and and well, tried to be a nice guy, but the reality is that I wasn't ever seeing reality. So I made up all kinds of stories about my dad, that he was the mayor of Knoxville. Well, he wasn't ever the mayor of Knoxville, and he was the president of this and this and this and this, because I wanted a dad that was real. I mean, that was good, not the dad I had. Let me say that again. I wanted a dad who wasn't the dad I had. I wanted a dad who was much better than that. Okay. And that, again, that's deception. I had the dad I had, and he had some horrible things with him, and he had some good things with him. And I've had to make peace with both of those things, not ignore either one. Right. And so, and that was just, that was what was happening in relationships too. I heard Pia say this in that podcast. She says, if you grew up with crappy parents, you probably have crappy friends, and you're probably going to marry somebody who's crappy. I mean, I think that's her words literally. No, that's Pia Miller. Yeah. And I was going, that's right. I started attracting crappy people around me, that look good on one level, but when it came to would they, have your back, nope. So when I went through my divorce, my only divorce, thank God, I've only got divorced once. You've been married 35 years to this precious woman. But what went with my ex-wife, who was a wonderful person, was all of my friends. I mean, because she was a better person than me. I mean, that's what I thought. But the truth of the matter is that they were not. I mean, that they were passive aggressive, and one of them that wasn't was the father of that girl that talked to you at the golf course. He was a guy who stuck in there with me and continued to have a relationship with me. So anyway, I don't know why I went there, but
we're in alignment, because my own experience is that the two things holding people back from the life they want are the wounds from childhood trauma, mm-hmm. and the denial. Denial is the single greatest killer on the mm-hmm. planet today, and no one's really talking about it. A lot of my stuff is about that, as you called it, deception. Mm-hmm. And the overwhelming denial and deception we all have about the wounds of our childhood. Mm-hmm. And that it's just, no, I grew up in a great childhood, or is like my posts on narcissism, people like, well, it had nothing to do with their childhood. They were raised perfectly. Or even mothers will go, my son was raised perfectly. Like the disconnect from our perfect imperfections mm-hmm. is I kind of came to this conclusion. It was something I'd never said until recently. Someone had commented along those lines that it's genetic, and Bruce Lipton, the science, genes get turned on by environment. You're not, mm-hmm. so all that it's predetermined is hogwash. It's childhood environment. That's it. Nothing else. Mm-hmm. And so I was having a discussion with someone, and I will if they're polite. If they're in that abusive place, I'm not going to stand in front of that. I'll stay on my side of the tennis court and let them have their reality and all of that. But I was like, do you recognize, it had just hit me in the moment of what you're implying and what you're saying is that there was nothing ever wrong in your childhood. That means you feel you were raised by what people term a God, a perfect human being. Mm-hmm. Are you aware of that? I've never heard of a perfect human being. Is it possible mm-hmm. you were raised by one? But that's...
Could you introduce me to that person?
But that's the position.
Right.
And they won't even get to the place of minimization of, well, they did some things, but it doesn't matter. They're steadfast. No. What are your thoughts on hard no? No.
Well, that and that is that is exactly what I'm talking about being walled off. I mean, you're living in deception because you're afraid that, and it's the dual world of this type of codependence or immaturity, that you wall off and you live in denial, but inside you're scared to death to know the truth, because then it must mean I'm a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be a piece of shit, so I'll make up this world that is a fake world, and I'll go, oh yeah, I did the same thing. Everybody does that.
Sure.
You did it too, and
I still do it. Like the journey never ends. There's still aspects I'm doing it, of course.
Right. You don't want to tell, everybody, when you're talking about your life that, well, a good part of it had some pretty shitty things in it, but excuse my French, as they say. Mierda is my French person would say, mierda. Anyway, but see that, that's where the boundary thing comes into play, because if you're learning in truth, I mean, you have to process through this. But if you learn about the truth of yourself, that you have inherent value because of who you are.
Yes.
Okay. Not because of what you know, not because of what you do, not because of who's your friend, but who you are.
I equate it to this. You had said to me for years, Kenny, when can you learn to just be? And I never understood that. Because I remember I volunteered at a prison to go in and talk to people in the prison. And you're like, man, you just keep doing. I wonder, when you're going to be able to just be. And I was like, what? And the concept made sense to me when I could finally sit still in pure quiet. No phone, no TV, no music, nothing. And I felt a sense of warmth, safety, comfort, and bliss, just being with me.
Right.
I'm an okay person. And so I'm single. I take myself out on dates. I like going out with me. I just do. And that to me, that's when I got, that's the beingness of Pia, of all this stuff. It finally settled in. I can be me.
Well, and it's interesting because first of all, I want to say I apologize to Pia. This is my interpretation of your work, and I'm so grateful to you for all your work. But it's been regurgitated and mixed into my life, and I think that's what you would want me to do with it. And same thing with you. The other side of that is that I realized that when I was younger, most people thought I was an extrovert. And I'm not. I'm an introvert. And what we're talking about here, folks, is that an extrovert gets energized by being around lots of people, okay, and lots of activity. An introvert is drained by that. Now, I can go and, I'm a musician. I used to play all the time, and then I would play, to 1,000 people. And I'd go home and I'd want to sit in front of my computer, or I'd want to go to bed or whatever, because I'd be so drained. I loved it, but it would drain me because I'm an introvert. I energize by alone time. Now, it wasn't until I got to this piece that we're talking about where I could be alone, because I was always afraid to be alone, because I was afraid of what my thoughts were saying about me, and they weren't positive thoughts. The other point is that, yes, there is that warm acceptance of ourselves that happens, and it's imperfect too, by the way, and
it vacillates.
It vacillates. It's substantial.
And it's okay that it vacillates.
Right. And it's a process of growth. Okay. And we're in a process. One of the things I probably said to you 100 times is, Kenny, you've got to accept that this is a process. You're not going to get fixed today. It's a process. Be committed to the process of growing and maturing, and you'll get there. And you
I
have
got to tell a story about that. I want you to finish.
okay.
Go ahead.
But the other thing, and I think it's one of the things that we're so afraid of, is that when we face the reality from behind the wall, there's grief and sadness. And that's okay.
Yes.
It's okay to grieve. It's okay to be sad that it wasn't perfect, that you're not perfect. You can then embrace what it really was. And not everybody's grown up with, psychopaths, but even if you did, that doesn't mean that you don't have value.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you don't have, I was talking to somebody the other day, and I was thinking about their history, and it was just horrible. And they're one of the best fathers. This guy is one of the best fathers I've ever known, and he didn't have a father. His father was a psychopath, literally, a murderer. And this guy's he's been a client for years, and he came back and just wanted to process some things. And he was going, how could my dad be like that? And I go, I don't know. How could you be so different? You chose to grow. And look who you are. Look at your children. And the same thing. I didn't grow up in the most wonderful family. I'm a great dad. I have raised 3 men, and they're great men. They're not perfect men, but they're great men. And they're men that are growing and changing. They're not stagnant. They're not perfect, but they're great men. I love them all dearly. And that comes from you being able to make peace with your history, and you cannot, if you're in denial, you will never grow. You will never change until you get in enough pain that you'll go, F word, I gotta do something here, or I'm gonna die. And some people die.
Yeah.
Or they get divorced and but what do you want?
But even, I can remember times in our sessions where you'd share stories of your imperfection as a father. But it was your, that's what
I had to learn how.
Yeah, when it was what taught me how to make amends to my children.
Right.
Like, okay, like as young kids, like I personally believe if you're not making amends 1 to 3 times a day with your kids, you're not present.
Right.
You're just not present as a parent because you're not seeing how perfectly imperfect you are and how you lose your cool here and are dismissive there. And these little subtle things that leave these little psychic wounds in our kids. And it's not to say I'm a bad person. But see, with denial, you're right. You go into that shame piece and I can't admit it. I'm terrible. But when you do, the work, the reclamation work, it's actually emboldening. It's like, God, I love myself. I owned my imperfection. And that's why I'm such a proponent of what I call the darkness or many other terms of imperfection. But that's where peace is. It's the acceptance. That is all of me.
Right.
Both. Neither is better than the other. It's the completeness of the two that make the whole of me. And so much of recovery, or what people try to do is, I can't remember who said it, but we're born a person, and because of the wounds of childhood, we develop personalities. And then what most people try and do is suppress the personalities that are so-called bad, that, the shame-based, this is bad. And then they're like, I'm going to lead with this and just be this. And no, that's not recovery. Recovery is the integration of both, accepting these, and then learning to temper with moderation and things that, wait a minute, if you fully get out, that's not a benefit to all of us, but you are accepted because that's just your pain. but it's that suppression. I'm bad. That's not recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Recovery has to include the love and adoration of our perfect imperfections. That is filled with shame.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to tag on something you said a minute ago, because you used the word darkness, and being walled off and in denial is a life of living in darkness. I mean, that's what deception is. It's not knowing. You think you know the truth and you don't.
Yeah.
Okay. And I've been deceived in my life, believe me. And I thought I knew what I was going, and I was wrong, and I didn't. And it was because I was walled off, and I wasn't willing to look at life in the light.
Yes.
And so what we're talking about is a life that's living in the light. And is there scary things about that? Yes. Is there sad things about that? Yes. But there's also joy and life and peace.
Yes. And in my life experience, when I made peace with the shame-based part, not the lying part of the darkness, not the avoidance part, but the broken pieces of the darkness of how awful I can be. Not because I'm bad, but because that's part of life's journey.
Because you're hurt.
What's that? Because I'm hurt. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It was the reclamation. That's when joy hit for me. And that took, the second marriage, the divorce, the suicide stuff, that level of pain broke the piece of darkness I wasn't going to let go of was control.
Right.
I had to have it because I was trying to mitigate the pain, but it was.
Or the facade of control.
Exactly. Yes. That's what, no, I'll be out in front and all this stuff. And it was like, no, it's killing me. This is the one thing I haven't let go of. I've got to drop it. Now, do I still grab back at it? You bet I do. It's a constant look. Now this is a perfect time for the story. Because everyone wants the journey to be over. Every new client I get, every university student, they're like, when's this going to be over? When do I arrive? Like, and I remember coming into you, it was probably somewhere 2 to 4 months into the process. And I was learning about boundaries and everything. I came screaming into the office and I'm like, gosh, this is just driving me crazy. I'm like, what's going on? And I said, well, I know all about boundaries and I'm driving up here and there's a guy driving too slow in the left lane and I'm screaming at him, trying to control him. And I know I'm supposed to have boundaries. Like I learned all the vernacular and everything, but I couldn't contain myself. And I'm like, that's just so stupid. I should be able to do it. Why can't I do it? Like I should get this figured out, And you just sat there and you laughed at me and you said, Kenny, how old are you? And I think I was 38 at the time. And you said, so how many years have you lived this other way with this coping skill and this set of beliefs and ideas? 38 years, right? So you think that after 30 years of repetition, 2 to 4 months, whatever it's been, it's going to be gone. And then I asked you, well, how long do you think it'll take? And you said, 3 to 5 years. And without hesitating, I dropped a big FU because I wanted it now. Like, what? 3 to 5 years? I figured I had a month or two left and I'm done. Like I'm healed. Well, as it turns out, it was 12 years. It was getting to the suicide, that for the first time, I call it getting to the other side. And I remember having a vision when I first started working with you of I'm climbing this mountain and I will get to the other side. I remember those first initial days of the process, I knew it. Well, I didn't know it'd take me 12 years to land on that sense of, oh, it's a journey, it's okay. And now I don't know that everyone else will take that long or longer or whatever, but it does take a while to get the acceptance of this is now the joy of life. It's all of it. And that climb up the hill, you're still trying to avoid it. You're missing the joy in the darkness. You're trying to learn how to make peace with it and eventually go over that side. And that for me took me 12 years. What was it for you? Do you remember that day? Did you
Well,
have
I'm just glad I didn't say what I think today,
I don't know what that
because I would say today the rest of your life.
is.
You know, it's again, we're not talking about a fix. We're talking about a process of growth and maturity.
Yeah.
And so I'm still, I'm still growing and learning. And do we have epic moments? Yes. And those epic moments are foundational to learning how to embrace who we are, and differentiate who we are from other people. All that stuff. But it's, and so what was your term? You at 12 years you got to
The other, I just call it the other side.
the other side.
Yeah.
Right. And the thing that I want to comment too that I really appreciate is your mountain and this is the thing I saw in you, is that you were determined to climb the mountain. Now, what most people do is go around the mountain, same level over time, and they just repeat the same thing over and over and over until they either get in enough pain that they've got to do something different, because they're doing the same things over and over, expecting different results. And what do they say about that in AA?
Since the definition of insanity.
Exactly. And so, do I want to keep doing the same things and expecting different results, or do I want to learn how to do it differently? And that's the thing that I saw in you, that you said, I want to be over that mountain in 2 months, but you were climbing the mountain. You were climbing to get over that mountain.
It's the affirmation that's the most positive of myself, the piece of myself I'm the most proud of, or have the most endearing feeling towards myself for is, one, I'm willing to do the work. It's kind of a combination. I'm willing to do the work, and I love to be called out on my bullshit. I love to have my denial and the death of darkness, how I'm in deception, pointed out to me. Because when I can see that, it gives me a choice. And from there, I can get into truth. I can put a plan in, I can turn it around. And so, when I get those nasty comments online, what does it hurt? Of course. Do I have a natural reaction? Of course. But that skill set always comes up and goes, where's the truth, Kenny? Maybe they have a point. You need to look at that, because if you're going to be helping people, you got to, for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
This is my internal moral and value, is it matters to me to face my stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so while it doesn't feel good to get those things, it also feels good, because then when I see it, I walk away going, man, I owned it. I freaking love that about me. And so I don't know where that came from.
Well, I don't either, but I'm glad it was there. And, to me, I think I do know where it came from. And I think that comes from the spiritual reality of our universe, and that you're connected to that. And I don't think you can develop true self-esteem apart from spirituality. But I think that spirituality is good, and it's committed to our healing and our growth. And so whatever has happened, you connected somehow, and that's all that matters. That puts you in that path. And there's two things I want to bring up before we go, and I think this probably needs to be how we wrap it up for today.
That works for me, yeah.
One is, not everybody came from abuse. Okay. I'll never forget sitting in the kitchen of a friend of mine here in Colorado, here in Monument, where I live, and I've been steeped in so much abuse around me, and my friend said, not everybody's been abused, and your frame of reference is that there's a criminal waiting right outside the door to, and he's right. He was right, and I was glad he challenged me on that. and however, everybody does grow up in an imperfect world. And so, as you said earlier, I have not been a perfect parent, but I have been a parent that was willing to grow and change and face myself when I didn't know how to parent and change, because, when I was 33, I had 3 teenagers. My son, my middle son has a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old, and he's 47. So he's had, what is that? 14 more years of life experience. And, and that's a concept I constantly am talking about. I say, the only difference between me and you is experience. I've had more years than you have to figure out more things and to fail at more things and to learn about more things. But that's it. My 15-year-old granddaughter's brilliant. She thinks she knows everything. She's 15. Okay. She hasn't learned everything. My 13-year-old grandson, he's 13. I thought I knew everything when I was 13. I thought I knew everything when I was 15. I didn't, and you only have to be 30 to know what you didn't know when you're, or 25 even. Yeah. And I'm constantly saying to younger people, guys in their 20s, I'm going, developmentally, you're on task. You're just not going to be able to be consistent. Again, that's the difference between you and me. I've lived longer. I've learned how to be more consistent with this stuff. You can't be that consistent at 25. Yeah. There's too many other things going on. But going back to this idea, my wife says, children are wonderful observers, lousy interpreters. Mm. And there's a ton of wisdom in that because, when we talk about child development, and before you're entering into adolescence, you're very egocentric, which means that you think the world evolves around you and that you are the cause of everything. So if your mom and dad have an argument, you think it's you. It's something you did, or if your mom is drunk, you think you caused that. Or if your mom, is mad, whatever, I can't think of a good analogy, but, and not just your mom, if your dad, I'm not trying to be sexist, moms are wonderful. Today's Mother's Day, and I got the most wonderful little video from a friend today about that I sent to all the moms in it. But the reality is we don't have the life experience and the wisdom to interpret in those ages. And so we make up what we think is reality. Okay. And that's not our fault. That's our development. That's just normal development. And we have magical thinking. We think we're a lot more powerful than we are. And we make up assumptions about ourselves. And some of those things create this false self, okay, of who we are. All right. And our parents may love us and with all their heart and have worked really hard on themselves, but they're still imperfect. They're still going to make mistakes. And if I came to believe that I had to be perfect for them to be perfect, you hear what I'm going? Then trauma has occurred. Okay. And I now have a distorted view of myself and I have a distorted view of reality. And so then I've got to adapt to that. So how do I accommodate that? Well, and that's how we create these adaptations from whether I've often talked about, this concept that, we're taught that we can do anything, not overtly, covertly, because many of us grew up in homes where we really, our parents, God bless them, were wanting us to look good so they could look good because they didn't feel good about themselves. Now, who hasn't grown up in that home? Okay.
Well, are we talking about the ones that will admit it? Or
right. Well, I'm telling you that is, I've never not seen that in the years that I've been a professional. But once we start adapting, we're no longer in our authentic self, and really developmentally we can't be. we have to be at a place where we have the power. Our parents had the power when we were young, then our friends in high school and in that time period, and then we start becoming adults, and then we have the power. That's the good news. You can't change your mom or dad or your perpetrator or your friend who doesn't like you. You can now. You have the power. You can change yourself. There's that. All right. The other thing is, I'm just speaking to the therapists out there. We live in a world where, we get compensated by insurance companies, and so you get on a panel, and there's 100 people on that panel. Insurance says go to see that person. Okay. Now, the thing that I have attempted to do throughout my career and in my life is to take people as far as I've gone. And I've been able to admit that, there's places I can't take people because I haven't gone there myself. But there is a difference in life coaches. There is a difference in therapists. And if your therapist can't be self-referencing in a session,
let them know what that means. I don't think a lot of people know what self-referencing means.
Well, meaning that that like what we're talking about our lives. This is what therapy is, Yeah. And learning to share, our fears and our failures and our successes. But I mean, there is a distinct difference, in my opinion. I've been to a guy for EMDR because of it happened in my life, who was a wonderful EMDR therapist. I mean, really had all the tools. He was the worst therapist I'd ever been around, and because he didn't share his life with me. He didn't build trust with me in that regard. And he just, when it came to being a therapist, I mean, he literally said, well, you shouldn't feel that way. And I went, I'm paying you $275 for you to tell me I shouldn't feel the reason that I'm coming here. That's your fix. And I got up and left.
And what's so sad is that is so common. I get comments. I get two things. One side of the street is, oh my God, you actually talk about your stuff. Thank you. And then the other side, how unprofessional of you.
Yeah, right. And those are those people living behind that wall, in my opinion.
Yes.
Now, that I could be totally wrong. And there is boundaries and limitations on what I'm talking about.
Yes.
You've got to be careful with all that. But at the same time, if you're wanting a way out of this other life, you need to go with somebody who's walked it, who will walk with you, not walk away from you, or not shame you, or not try to, do a technique on you that they learned in graduate school.
Yeah.
You've got, at least for me, that
intimacy and connection. Like, let's face it, who do you want to be? All of us are vulnerable with somebody we can identify with. And how do we identify with someone? We share stories. We share our experience, strength, and hope. And my God, so I'm not bad? You mean you're this way too? Oh, thank God.
Right. During COVID, our lives have changed. I was stuck in Texas for 8 months. And my life was living on a computer. You and I started, connecting because of COVID, again, because, you just don't have the opportunity to have, thank God I'm vaccinated and I can now enter into, my office again, but I couldn't do that. And I began to feel depressed, and I knew it because I was avoidant. I didn't want to talk to, with neurofeedback, I do assess a lot of data, and then I try to explain that data to, my patients. And and sometimes the data doesn't look good, and then I found myself being avoidant, where I just didn't want to talk to that person because I didn't want to give them bad news, and I didn't understand why they were having what they were, and then blah blah blah. And this friend of mine who works for the Amen Clinic in California, he called me and he said, "Can we talk?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I need to tell you." He said, "I think I'm depressed." And he just described word for word my thoughts about, the way I was interpreting my environment. And he, as he did, I said, "You know what?" I said, "I've been feeling exactly the same way." And that was what you just said. When that was enough for me to pop out of it, and it was enough for him to know he's not alone. He's not the only one that's feeling this way. Lots of people are feeling this way with COVID.
Yeah. It's why I got in touch with you. I said, Mike, I don't have agency in my life. I'm not dating anyone. My profession makes it difficult to have friends.
Right.
The world the way it is. I mean, so many factors. I'm isolated on an island. I love talking about my stuff, but the other thing I notice is when I talk about my stuff, unless you want to learn, people shun you.
Mm-hmm.
At least they shun me. They back away, whether that's in dating life or anything. So I'm like, I just need someone that I can talk to about stuff that matters to me and gets me. I need to be heard. I need to. And so whether it's us talking, concepts about clients or just anything, I just need to know I'm safe and I can be me. And I don't have to wall off or protect, because I know if I bring up what, I've had it happens a lot. I bring up what I do, people walk away. Like I need somewhere I can go where someone isn't going to walk away.
Right. And, I was just thinking that, I have a client who's come down from he doesn't live in Colorado, and when he got, I just love this guy. He used to be a client here in Colorado, and he's doing neurofeedback, and part of, we're kind of doing an intensive setting, and part of that is including talk therapy. And when he got in there, he's just talk. I mean, and I'm going, you know what, friend, we're going to meet twice a week where you can just talk, because you just need to connect with people, and doesn't cost you a bit more. I just want to give you an avenue where you can connect with somebody, and I want it to be me. And same thing with you when you called to do this, but that is so important in the therapeutic process, whether you're a life coach or whether you're a therapist, that when, or whether you're looking for a life coach or a therapist, in my opinion, that it is somebody that it knows that you have to be safe. Young Life has this concept called winning the right to be heard.
Yeah.
And that's, I've carried that since I was, 16, 17 years old, winning the right to be heard. That is my job as a professional, and that is your job as a professional. Yes, we present concepts, and some of these concepts can be life-changing, and neurofeedback can be life-changing, and EMDR can be life-changing, and PMLD and you can be life-changing. But bottom line is, if we don't have a real human connection, we won't change, because, we're, of all those obstacles that we've talked about today.
Beautifully said. Let's end it right there. That's perfect.
All right.
Yeah.
And by the way, your apartment is beautifully decorated, and as you can see, I have kind of my studio. I'm a couple of my instruments here. This is where I spend a lot of time these days. This is my little home office, and I did move my picture over, but I can still see it's not centered on my head, but it doesn't.
Well, that's it. We're just going to stop this whole thing and start over, because that picture just won't work, Mike.
Okay. And just in honor of you, I'll go back to.
Yes, we have to end the show with us both.
Gotta have it.
apportioned appropriately, right?
And by the way, you look marvelous. You really do. So, and folks out there, he really is marvelous. You know, this is not your average person. This is an exceptional person.
Thank you. My personal feeling is we're both pretty special.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I love you.
I love you too. All right, let's
Thank
leave.
you, everybody. I appreciate you tuning in. I'm glad you got to meet Mike. My hope is that you get to see more of Mike and learn more from Mike, so we can all grow and become the safe, happy, content people that I believe we all deserve to be, and we all want, whether that's as a parent, as a friend, or in a relationship. And so, as I always say, as I learned, you can see I learned from this great man, enjoy the journey.